Hello, I'm Jim Rambo, technical trainer with the GSA. Now let's talk about configuring real-time data for the GSA. Up until now, all the content we've dealt with was fetched from servers, or it was sent from a feed and it was indexed, built up in a large index. You could set up you could do page ranking calculations on it, you could calculate relevancy on it, and there was a lot of text to deal with. Now we're talking about is highly transactional data that comes in small chunks, that it would be nice to be able to, for the user at serve time to just make a request out to a web service and get results back right away. And the reason for this is that the data may be changing so rapidly that indexing it might not make sense, because by the time you index it, it might be irrelevant or out of date. So we're going to describe the features and benefits of this real-time data and then show you how to write something called a Onebox module. It's a piece of code, sits on a web server, and waits for a request from the GSA at serve time. Here's what the architecture looks like. The search appliance does not index the data. When the user runs a request at search time, then the search appliance sends a request out to the Onebox module, and that code retrieves the data from maybe an enterprise content management system, a database, or a custom application. The really good value here is that it doesn't count as any hits against your license. So you could be checking for data in a database with millions of records, and it won't count at all on your license count. It's a GET request that the GSA sends out, and it receives an XML response back from the Onebox provider that you write. Now let's take a look at some examples of how this might come out. In the bottom left here is an example of an application we wrote where we provide status reports on candidate applicants for jobs. And we can see what the job candidate, who that is, what position they're applying for, the status, whether it's pending. And so if an HR person wants to find out in their search appliance what's the latest status on this candidate's application, they can get a snapshot of real-time data to find out from the HR system what's the latest information. You can also display graphical data in here. On the right-hand side, this one kind of breaks some of our style sheet recommendations. It's a little bit more data, but this is an example of pulling multiple records from a database, where maybe you want to find out all contacts in your CRM system that have an example might be Adam in their name. Okay. This is an example of Onebox module that a partner wrote, and they wrote it in about 30 minutes. So it doesn't take very long to write a Onebox module. Some examples, some real-world examples of customers that are using Onebox modules might be the Royal Bank of Australia and Arizona State University, or Reuters. Let's take a look at some of these. At Google.com, you've seen some of these before for consumer data. If I started typing weather and entering my zip code, already here's the Onebox data. There's a weather service out there, some web service that's listening for search requests coming from Google.com, and weather was the key word, the trigger word. We call it a trigger. And you may enter in a 5-digit zip code. Okay, this is Palo Alto, this is where I live. And here's the real-time data coming back. Graphical display, it's changing frequently. Another example of one that might be is flights from SFO to LHR, like London Heathrow. There's another, now these are promoted links here at the top, but down here is a Onebox that provides links to the various airline search engines. If I click on United, this changes look at this. The link goes right there, already inserts the information in. So the focus here is that it's a small portion of the search results window. It's at the top. Relevance is not included. It's going to be high value. Often there's going to be links going right back to the rest of the data. Let's go to the Royal Bank of Australia and see how they've implemented Onebox. They have, if you enter in the name of one of their executive officers, their bio sheet will pop up with links to their personal information. Let's see if I got the right name. Yep. So Stevens is our CEO. Here's his Onebox module with picture and links to more information. Here are the algorithmic results below. Reuters has a stock ticker symbol lookup. So if you enter in a 4-letter or 3-letter stock ticker symbol lookup, the Onebox module, if it matches a symbol, it will display the latest stock information. And here are the algorithmic search results below. Now what we've shown you is the value. Let's take a look at how to set this up with the search appliance. Here's a diagram of what it looks like. The search appliance at search time sends a GET request to the web service along with the query term that the user entered in. This Onebox module you write, it could be Java, Python, Perl, C#, .NET, doesn't matter. All it needs to do is receive a GET request and then parse out this search term from the query URL, from the URL that it receives. Perform some back-end application lookups, and then returns an XML file in the proper format so the search appliance can include that in its search results. Let's take an example. If we want to build a Onebox module that looks like this, it's got a picture it's got an icon for a user lookup. It'll tell us the first couple of users that it found. Here's the trigger word employee, lookup term is Smith, and there's a link back to the LDAP server for more information. So what we'll do is we'll go in and configure a Onebox module. We'll set its threshold in time, and we'll give it a name, and we'll create it. And then we will specify the trigger mechanism and the URL of the web service. Now let's take a look at our example service. I have a web service waiting on the Athens server. It's a CGI script called person.cgi. If it doesn't receive any request, if it does not receive requests for any user lookup then in its URL, then it will just return the portion of the XML that's required by the GSA. It's the Onebox results tag, provider. It's got a title, URL text. This will be the text that displays at the top, so famous people search lookup, and then a link possibly to more information. And there may be an image. So there's an image on this web server that will also be used to display the logo for this Onebox. If the Onebox receives a request from the search appliance with query equals, let's say Adam. The web service was written to parse out that search term and return the XML results, one module result per result that was found, and it just adds fields with the name of the field and its value. The standard style sheet for the Onebox module will take this and render one user response per row. Now to set this up, if I also looked for, let's see if I look for Smith. Let me see if I can get multiple results here. Okay, now I got two results, Adam Smith and Frank Smith. Okay, so one row of data will be displayed, and then another row of data will be displayed in the Onebox module. This is standard. It's a very simple style sheet, but you can modify the style sheet. To set this up, we'll go to the GSA. We'll go to Serving, Onebox Modules, and we already have one Onebox module, looks like, created here. Let's create another. We'll just call this Person. And create it. Right now the time limit was set to 1,000 microseconds. I don't know if you noticed that. I'll show it to you in a minute. We'll use the keyword as a trigger. We can set it to be employee or let's say worker. We can also set it up to be a regular expression like 4-character sequence for a stock ticker lookup. We can set it to be always triggered on this, and then we'll add this Onebox to the front end, and every time a user goes to that front end, that Onebox will automatically, the GSA will automatically send out a search request to that to the Onebox module. Now there's several different ways to implement Oneboxes. One of them is a collection inside the index, which we did for people search. Another one is user added results, but the one we're interested in with the most value is the external provider. And this is where we enter in the URL to our web service on the Athens server. You could also set up security. This would be used for user authentication, and this would be used if you're going to set up SSL. It's a good idea to set up SSL between the Onebox provider and the GSA and encrypt it and send a password, user ID and password, so that only the GSA can make queries to your web service. Let's save the configuration. Now the Onebox has been created, it just hasn't been added to a front end yet. So if I go to a front end now, I'll create a new front end and we'll call this person. And I'll edit it and add the Onebox module. I'll click on Onebox modules. Here I can choose them from a list. Person was added. And I'll save this settings. Now when we make a search request to the person front end, the person Onebox may be triggered if we use the employee or the worker as a keyword. If I ran a search for, let's say, employee Adam, but I didn't select the front end, I don't see any Onebox results. I don't see any algorithmic results either. Now let's change the front end to person and the style sheet to person. My front end was called. The Onebox trigger word was in the first word in the search. The GSA sent the search term piece out to the Onebox. The Onebox looked in its little database and saw that it had a couple entries, and it returned the results. Well, let's see what they look like by removing the style sheet here, and we'll see what the raw XML looks like coming back. Okay, these are the Onebox results right here, and you can see your entries with the fields and the values. Now let's go back and change the timeout threshold to a much smaller margin so we get some timeouts and see what happens. So go to Onebox modules. Let's just set this to maybe 10 milliseconds. That's probably going to time out every single time. And we'll save the settings. Now I run another search. This time we don't see any Onebox results even though we used the trigger word. Okay? That was because it timed out. And we can do a little bit of troubleshooting here to find out what happened by going to the log messages. Here under, next to the Onebox module is a view logs. And here you'll see employee, we saw employee triggered and piece found results. And here's how many results we found. We might see that we didn't get any, we had employee trigger word was sent, but we didn't get any search results, and you would also find that in here in the logs. But here is a timeout, so just for your information to know how to do some troubleshooting. Some more things to know about our Onebox modules. You can add some flexibility. Here's how you would add multiple trigger words. So any one of these can be, there's an or symbol, so either one of these words can be used. I can go back to my example and use the other trigger word, worker, and I'll get my Onebox results. If I use something else, like maybe Adam, and I don't use my trigger word, I get no results, right? You can also set up regular expressions, and here's where if we have something similar to the flights Onebox that we looked up before, we could have more than one search term sent back. These would be returned not only as just the search term in the query term, but also the values would be inserted in variables P0 and P1 for these different regular expressions that were matched. So just look in the documentation for a little bit more details on that. To modify the XSLT style sheet, just click on Edit XSL and you can upload a style sheet of your own. There's a default style sheet code in the Onebox simulator at code.google.com. If your users are searching for secure results, then what will happen is the GSA will send a prompt for a username and password to the user. Those credentials are verified against the directory service. What you do is set up an LDAP server or whatever authentication service you want on the, whatever authentication method you want on the GSA. And if authentication succeeds, then the GSA sends the distinguished name to the Onebox provider. Onebox module configured with the user's access control, so the Onebox module can check to see if the user has access to permissions to result 1, result 2, result 3, and only send the ones they have results to. When the Onebox module is created, there's also a definition file that's created, and you can export this and then modify it and then re-import it if you want. For details on how to edit that file, see the documentation. So what we've done is we've described the features and benefits of real-time data, shown you how to write a Onebox provider, and how to configure the search appliance to call that provider and get the results back at serve time. Just some highlights to remember. Remember, there's no hits to your license, data's not indexed, and you may want to work with that timeout threshold. For more details, see our documentation.